What would you say if you knew your next words might be your last? Imagine sitting alone in a cold prison cell, knowing the end is near. Your strength is fading. Your enemies are closing in. The world has moved on. Yet instead of writing words of fear, you write words of courage, purpose, and hope. That is exactly what happened when the Apostle Paul wrote his final letter to a young leader named Timothy. Paul was not writing from a palace. He was not surrounded by success, comfort, or applause. He was waiting for execution in Rome. But his final message was not about regret. It was about finishing well. His words reveal the secrets of a life that remains faithful when circumstances become difficult. How to stand strong when others quit. How to lead when you feel unqualified. How to keep faith when the future looks uncertain. And how to leave behind a legacy that outlives you. More than 2,000 years later, Paul's final message still speaks to anyone facing pressure, disappointment, fear, or uncertainty. In this documentary, we will uncover the timeless wisdom hidden in Paul's final words to Timothy, and discover why a letter written in a prison cell may contain some of the most powerful lessons for living today. The story begins with a dramatic contrast. Paul, once one of the most influential figures in the early Christian movement, was now imprisoned in Rome. The man who traveled across nations, planted churches, and changed countless lives was facing his final days. Yet his greatest concern was not himself. His concern was Timothy. Paul had become a spiritual father and mentor to Timothy, a younger leader who carried the responsibility of guiding others. Timothy was gifted, but he also struggled with fear and insecurity. Paul knew the challenges ahead would test him. In 2 Timothy 1:7, Paul writes, "For God has not given us a spirit of fear, but of power, and of love, and of a sound mind." This was not a motivational quote written from a comfortable place. These were the words of a man who had experienced rejection, imprisonment, suffering, and danger. Paul understood something important. Courage is not the absence of fear. Courage is choosing faith even when fear is present. Many people today face their own prisons. It may be financial pressure, uncertainty about the future, broken relationships, career struggles, or the feeling that life has not turned out as expected. Paul's message reminds us that our circumstances do not have the final authority over our purpose. Timothy did not need a perfect situation to make an impact. He needed a faithful heart. And that leads to Paul's first lesson. Before you can influence the world around you, you must first overcome the battles happening within you. But Paul had another warning for Timothy, because courage alone is not enough. A person must also protect what they believe. One of Paul's greatest concerns was that Timothy would remain faithful in a world full of distractions and confusion. In 2 Timothy 1:14, Paul says, "Guard the good deposit that was entrusted to you." Paul describes faith like a treasure, something valuable that must be protected. A treasure left unguarded eventually gets stolen, damaged, or forgotten. In the same way, our values, beliefs, character, and purpose require protection. Timothy lived in a world where many voices competed for attention. False teachings were spreading. Some people abandoned the truth when it became inconvenient. Paul knew that pressure would come. The same is true today. Modern life constantly challenges people to trade their convictions for acceptance. Many sacrifice integrity for success, honesty for opportunity, or relationships for personal gain. But Paul teaches Timothy that what is valuable is not always what is popular. Jesus often demonstrated this principle. He did not chase approval from crowds. He remained committed to truth, even when people misunderstood him. Guarding what has been entrusted to us means asking important questions. What kind of person am I becoming? What values guide my decisions? What legacy am I building? A successful life is not measured only by achievements, wealth, or recognition. It is also measured by character. Paul knew his time was ending, but he was confident because he had protected what mattered most. And as his final letter continues, Paul gives Timothy another challenge, not just protecting faith, but actively passing it on to others. One of the most beautiful parts of Paul's final message is that he was thinking beyond his own lifetime and knew his earthly journey was ending, but he also knew the mission had to continue. In 2 Timothy 2:2, Paul writes, "And the things you have heard from me, entrust to reliable people who will also be qualified to teach others." Paul reveals a powerful principle. True success is not only about what you accomplish, it is about what continues after you are gone. A legacy is not simply a name remembered by others. It is the influence you leave behind in people's lives. Paul invested in Timothy. Timothy would invest in others. Those people would influence generations beyond them. This is how meaningful change happens. Parents do this when they teach wisdom to their children. Leaders do this when they develop future leaders. Teachers do this when they inspire students. Mentors do this when they share lessons learned through experience. Many people spend their lives trying to build something they can keep. Paul teaches us to build something that can continue. The question is not only, what am I achieving? The deeper question is, who is becoming stronger because of my life? A person's greatest impact may not be seen in their possessions or accomplishments, but in the lives they help shape. Paul's final days were not focused on preserving his reputation. They were focused on preparing someone else for the future. But passing on wisdom requires something else, endurance, because every meaningful journey eventually faces hardship. Near the end of his letter, Paul writes one of the most famous reflections in Scripture. In 2 Timothy 4:7, he says, "I have fought the good fight. I have finished the race. I have kept the faith." These words carry the weight of a lifetime. Paul was not claiming that life had been easy. His journey included suffering, rejection, danger, and sacrifice. He was beaten, imprisoned, criticized, and abandoned by some who once stood beside him. Yet he did not define his life by his struggles. He defined it by his faithfulness. The image Paul uses is that of a race. A race is not won by the person who starts with the most excitement. It is completed by the person who keeps moving when the journey becomes difficult. This lesson applies far beyond religion. Every person faces moments when quitting seems easier. A business fails. A dream feels impossible. A relationship becomes difficult. A personal goal takes longer than expected. In those moments, Paul's words remind us that endurance creates a different kind of victory. Finishing well does not mean never experiencing hardship. It means hardship does not control the final chapter of your story. Paul's life shows that a meaningful life is not measured by comfort, but by commitment. And as Paul writes his final words, he reveals the greatest source of his confidence, not his accomplishments, but the hope he carried beyond this life. The most powerful part of Paul's final message is that he was facing death without despair. He knew his life was ending, but he did not believe his story was ending. In 2 Timothy 4:8, Paul writes about the crown of righteousness awaiting those who remain faithful. His confidence came from knowing that his identity was not built only on this temporary world. Paul had experienced enough suffering to understand that possessions, popularity, and human approval cannot provide lasting security, but hope can. This hope changed the way he faced his final moments. Many people spend their lives searching for something that will give them peace, success, money, recognition, or control. Yet even after achieving these things, many still feel empty. Paul's final message points to a deeper foundation. A life built on purpose, faithfulness, love, and service carries a strength that circumstances cannot easily destroy. Timothy received this letter thousands of years ago, but its message reaches us today. We all have limited time. The question is not whether our lives will end. The question is what we will do with the time we have been given. Will we live distracted or purposeful? Will we chase temporary approval or lasting meaning? Will we leave behind memories, or will we leave behind a legacy? Paul's final words were not the words of a defeated man. They were the words of someone who knew he had lived with purpose. And that may be the greatest lesson of all. A life well lived is not one without struggle. It is one that remains faithful through the struggle. Paul's final message to Timothy gives us wisdom that reaches across generations. He teaches us to replace fear with courage, protect what truly matters, invest in others, endure difficult seasons, and live with a purpose bigger than ourselves. Paul's circumstances changed, but his mission remained. His prison could not silence his message. His suffering could not erase his influence. His death could not stop his legacy. Today we face different challenges, but the questions remain the same. Are we living with purpose? Are we building something that will outlast us? Are we becoming the kind of person we hope to be remembered as? The final message of Paul reminds us that every life is writing a story. The choices we make today become the legacy we leave tomorrow. If Paul's final message to Timothy encouraged you, take a moment to share your thoughts in the comments. What lesson from Paul's life speaks to you the most? If you found this documentary meaningful, consider liking this video and sharing it with someone who may need encouragement today. Subscribe for more stories that explore timeless wisdom, biblical lessons, and principles for living a purposeful life, and turn on notifications so you never miss the next journey through history, faith, and the lessons that continue to shape humanity.